it's Mindy from My Creative Scoop, and I am so excited to show you this new Copic tutorial for Neat and Tangled. This month I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the different ways you can blend your colors together, and this is really going to focus on if you're a beginner or if you're new and you're just starting out getting all your Copics together. So this first image I'm going to color, I'm going to share with you how to get how to get a blend and how to get all those shadows using only 2 colors. So I'm going to start with my E30 and E31, and I'm going to first start by applying the color to the areas that I want to be shadowed. So I always try to tell everybody, not to really focus on the light source, especially if you're a beginner, because it can get really confusing. So what you want to do is just think about where the shadows make sense. So the shadows are going to make most sense for me underneath his body and on the inner parts of his legs. So we're just going to add a little bit of color. I'm going to go underneath of him and right behind this leg here and right underneath his tummy and onto this leg just on the inner parts. So now, since his head is big, it's going to cast a little bit of a shadow onto his back. So I'm just going to add a little bit of a shadow right underneath, right there. So, and then we'll go underneath his ears. So we'll add just a little bit of shadow right in there. And now we're going to blend it out with the E30. So I'm going to push the color out until I've got a nice blend, and then I'm just going to fill the rest of his body in. Now you notice when I did that, I sat there and I pushed this color out until I got a blend, and then I went one swipe over the rest of his body. Now the reason why I didn't go over it and over it and over it completely is because the more layers you put on with the E30 over here, the darker it's going to become. So I'm just going to kind of go along the side here. And the same thing here. I'm going to push this out until it's nice and blended. And then I'm just going to do one swipe over. And you could tell it's already so much longer, or lighter longer. So now right here you can still see a little bit of a kind of a little perimeter there of darkness. So I'm just going to do a heavy flick. So that way it softens out that harsh line. So now I'm going to blend this out. I'm going to stop right there because I want to give him a little bit of rosy cheeks. So I'm just going to take my R32, make a little dot and a little dot. Now we'll take the R30 and I'm going to go directly over in a circular motion, pulling the color out. Now back with my E30, I'm going to push this color out and then do one swipe over. And there you have a nice lightly shadowed deer. Now if you want to, I want to show you how you can go back to add it a little bit darker. So usually when I color, I always do a second coat because the more color you lay down, the more it's going to start to blend. So I'm going to go back with my E31. We're going to deepen up those shadows. So I'm going to go in that same spot again. I'm going to come down the back side of his head just a little bit. And now we're going to pull that out. So I'm just going to take my marker, I'm going to flick, and since we already have that color down, you see I have that nice highlight right over there. So again, we're going to add that layer and flick it towards the lighter area so it has a nice smooth gradient. Now I'm going to take my E31, and I'm going to show you how you can go back to add a darker color, with the darker color, how we're going to add multiple layers of that to deepen that. So first I'm going to lay down my E31 fully. So I'm just going to do one swipe over, filling this whole area in. I'm going to do the same thing for his chest and for his feet. And I'm going to leave that little part white for his tail. So now I'm going to take my E31 and I want to add another layer, but I want to do it in the shadowed areas so that way it stays, this part stays a little bit lighter, but it's still adding a little bit of depth. And this is again for beginners or people who are just starting their Copic collection, so they can use their markers and still get that defined look when coloring. So I'm just going to start at the back of the head and I'm going to flick going towards the lighter part. Add a couple of layers and now you can see there's it's a little bit more defined. So I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm just going to add a little bit of a shadow towards the bottom, and it's going to get lighter as it comes to the top because that's the underneath. And also on the back part of the tail that's coming off of the body, I'm just going to add a little bit of a shadow there as well. And let's go back and just deepen these up just slightly here. All right, so minus my two cheek colors, but I did that all with just two colors. So now I'm going to show you how to get the same look, but we're going to add more colors. So this time I'm going to add E33 to my E30 and 31, and also using my R32 and R30. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to take my E33 and I'm going to start in the shadowed areas. So the shadowed areas for this one is going to be all along the bottom of his legs here. So along the bottom, I'm just going to kind of trace, and then coming up from the bottom part of the body. And then also on this side, since the head's tilted and facing up, this part's going to be shadowed. And again, I'm going to go on the bottom parts of the ear and then along the back. Since the head's a little bit more tilted, I'm going to add a little bit more of a shadow. So now I'm going to take my E31 and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to push that color out, getting that nice blend. And the same thing down here. And as you could see, I started coming out a little bit more. So the E33 stopped about here, but I brought it all the way out over here because I want to pull that color out so I have that nice blend. Let's give him some rosy, or her some rosy cheeks. So that was my R32, this is my R30. So now I'm going to take my E30. I'm still going to leave a lot of this white. I'm not going to go back and fill it all in just yet. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to come out a little bit more using the E30. Still trying to leave as much white as I can because we want that area to stay its whitest. Okay, so now I want to go back and repeat. So that way when I do the one swipe over with my E30, this is still going to be much, much lighter than it would be if I were to put a coat of the E30 over it now and then do my repeat. So with your E33, we're going to trace and go back over everywhere that we added that E33 in the beginning. This is really going to deepen up those shadows. And then with the E31, And now with my E30. So I'm gonna work on getting this blended out before I do my one swipe over. So I'm just gonna pull that color through until I have a nice smooth blend, and then I'm gonna do one swipe over to fill in the rest of the area so that way it stays its lightest. I'm gonna do the same thing over here. So it's really tight and bright here. And then the one swipe over. And now I'm gonna, instead of doing these ones dark, I'm gonna change it up and make them a little bit lighter. So by doing that, all I'm going to do is take my E30 and just add a little bit of a shadow. So I'm gonna take the E30 and just go right from the back here, and I'm gonna go one swipe over, but I'm doing a heavy flick. And what I mean by that is I'm pushing down, but I'm flicking out. So that way I get a really nice smooth gradient that goes into the white nicely. And you could see how it just gives it that little bit of shadow. I'm gonna do the same thing down here. The shadowed area is gonna be below, so I'm just gonna kind of flick going up. That way it still has its lighter over there. And the same thing for the tail. Let's take our E33. I'm just gonna color in fully the little antlers. I guess it's a boy if it has antlers. There we go. Now let's go ahead and do the little hooves. So I'm just gonna go back and add a little bit of dark under where the shadowed areas with my E33. Oh, I forgot a little bit of the leg over there. And now I'm gonna take my E31 and I'm gonna do that heavy flick. So there we have it. So you can see the difference by adding one more color, how much more definition you can get. So now I'm gonna show you on this guy over here. He is going to be all of these colors, but now I'm going to go ahead and add some W5. And this is really gonna show you how you can really define and add all the, the deeper shadows. So we're gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna start with my E33. I'm gonna go in the shadowed areas. So on the inner parts of the legs. And since this one is completely underneath of him, it's gonna be a lot darker. So on the inner part of here, and then all along his tummy, and then on the back of his head and onto his back, and a little bit behind the tail. And we'll go underneath the ears and a little bit on the back of the head. Now I'm gonna take my E31. We're gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna color in fully the back of that leg. And now I'm just gonna come up a little bit more. A little bit more with each color. Let's give him some rosy cheeks. So R32 and then R30. And now I'm going to take my E30. And I'm going to do the exact same thing we did before with this one. I'm going to take it and do that little bit of a flick, pulling out that color, still leaving all of the white area. All the lightest part that we want to stay light, we're not coloring it in just yet. Now I'm going to go back with my W5 and I'm going to hit all those same spots that we did with the E33. So underneath the leg, I'm just going to start at the top and give it that shadow. And then on the inner parts of the leg, so I'm staying really close to the outline of the image. just giving it that little bit of a shadow, because when we go back right now with our E33 and we do that flick, it's going to push it out and blend it into the brown that we have. So a little bit of color really goes a long way with this. And right there, you can already tell a huge difference between here and here. So now I'm going to take my E33, and we don't want this to be gray. We want it to be a darker version of this brown. So I'm going to go directly over that, pulling that color out, replacing that gray with the brown, deepening that brown. So I'm just coming out just a little bit more with the E33 than with where I put the W5. And you can, if you don't have W5, you can use W3. It will give you a slightly lighter shadow, or you can also use an N. I wouldn't recommend using the C's because that has more of a cool base to it, and this has more of a brown, the warm does. But the N's will work just as fine too. So now I'm going to take my E31, and I'm going to pull that color out, doing that flicking, pulling out into the, blending it out into the color that we already have laid down. And now I'm going to take my E30, and I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to blend out what the color that we already have, so I have that nice smooth gradient. And then once I have it blended out, I'll do one swipe over to finish filling in so there's no more white left. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the darker, I'm going to do just like I did over here. So I'm going to add the E30, and I'm going to flick, blending it out, and then coming up from the bottom of the chest. And let's deepen that a little bit more since we've gone darker with this image. Let's take the E31 and just again add another little flick. I'm going to go back with my E30 just to blend that out again. And now let's take the E33, and we're going to go all along the bottom and on the back part of his little hooves there. And now let's take the E31, and we're just going to fill the rest of it in. And now we're going to take the W5, and we're going to deepen those shadows along the bottom just a little bit. Really makes it stand out. And then let's also take the W5, and we're going to color in the back of his mouth. And then we'll color his tongue the R32. And then the E33 for his little antlers. And if you wanted those to stand out a little bit more, you can also take the W5 and just go along one side. That way they have a little bit more depth to them. And let's take the R30, and we're just going to add a little bit of pink in the center of the ears. So I'm just doing a heavy flick so it blends nicely into the white. All right, so I hope you guys learned a little bit more about blending and which colors to use and how to lay down the color. If If you have any questions, you can always email me or post them in the comments, and I will answer them as soon as I can. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you again next month.